All right. Well, I'm excited to be joined by a multiple seven-figure seller who has built a global empire for himself and his business. So, John Ross, thank you for coming on Maximizing E-commerce.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, first off, I just wanted to explain to people how we know each other. So you had worked with me, or hired me basically to help you answer some questions. So I have a done for you service, but I guess in your case, it was more of like the done with you service. So kind of helping you along the way. And I've been kind of enthralled by all the things you've built with your business along the way. And so like, I feel like maybe I've taught you some things with the international part, but I feel like you've taught me some things and some things to think about, which we were even just talking about as we were hitting record. We're having a good conversation there. So I was like, we gotta hit the record button so people can benefit from this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you helped me a lot with the international expansion. That was something that we've had on our radar for a while now, up until last year. And it's daunting, right? There's a lot of different paperwork. I mean, something as simple as what do I need to fill out with the VAT registration? What forms do I need to think about? It's intimidating, I
Mhm.
would say. And so having somebody to partner with, hold your hand through that process is tremendously helpful, which is what obviously we did.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and I mean, once you're up and going, it's fairly straightforward. It's just that initial hurdle, which ends up taking, a while, multiple months to do. But yeah, having a partner in that is tremendously helpful.
Well, I'm glad I was able to help you there. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. I
Of course.
didn't prompt you to say that, but so much appreciated. But
Of
what I do
course.
want to go into a little bit more, what I think folks will definitely find helpful is your kind of backstory. So like, how did you get into this? Were you the lemonade stand kid going around knocking on doors, trying to get people to buy stuff?
Sure. You know what? If you're going that far back, then
Yeah, let's go that far
yeah,
back.
I was never the guy that was the like entrepreneur in grade school. I do remember when I was really young, I really loved playing video games that had money element to it, like where you
Okay.
build something. That's the
Hmm.
only like relative thing I could probably think of from early on. Really, I got into it. It was in my mid to late 20s. I'm 34 and 35 now. I
You're still
was
young.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I got into it because I was in a corporate role doing consulting in Chicago, driving back and forth to these client sites. And I mean, it's an hour. I live in the city, so it's an hour plus each way. Commute is brutal. The hours are brutal. And I mean, I was making good money, but it was a lifestyle that I did not think was sustainable.
Hmm.
And I had heard of just other ways I've always sort of been enamored with entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial endeavors, things
Hmm.
like that. And so I more or less got to a point where I said, okay, is this all there is until I turn 60 and retire at some point?
Yeah.
I need more time to myself. I mean, think about it, the sheer amount of hours in the day. I
Well,
mean,
how many hours a week were you working at the job itself?
you know what? It was probably 50, but then you add in 2 hours plus commuting, that increases it to
Yep.
at least 60 plus. And
Hmm.
it just, you come home from work and you still have to transition from work brain into,
Hmm.
and so if you think about it, you're leaving the house before 8, you're back, let's say around 6 or later. What time do you go to bed? Maybe 10. You got to make dinner, you got to do laundry, you got to do everything. It's not, in my mind, a great lifestyle. It's
Hmm.
got in my mind, I thought there's got to be something better out there than what I'm
Right.
doing. I'm a smart enough person. I can do this. My energy is going so heavily into this. Like, what if I just redirected that into something else,
Mm.
at least on the side to start with? Because these people that are making it and earning lots of money doing e-commerce, I feel like I felt at the time, okay, they're clearly smart people, but they're not like, nobody's a genius. You know what I mean? Like it's such a rare thing. This stuff isn't brain surgery. And so like, why not just work a little bit smarter doing something else that might potentially earn
How
passive
did you
income?
even find out about like this is a potential business? Because it's not like one of those things you are like taught in school.
Right, exactly. You know what? It was, and a lot of people have given me this as well as the Muse, but I read 4 Hour Work Week. That was
Right, right, right.
one. I remember just like zipping through that and be like, oh my God, like I did not know that this was how you could potentially organize your life. I read
Hmm.
other things like the classic kind of finance books like Rich Dad Poor Dad and things like
Hmm.
that. And that kind of started me down that path. I looked at drop shipping to begin with because that seemed to
Mm.
be like the popular thing at the time. This was 6 years ago.
Yeah. Oh,
And
there's no risk. You just,
exactly, no
right. Yeah.
money, no, yeah. But what I couldn't understand is, it seemed, first of all, if it was such a low barrier to entry, then wouldn't like a lot of people be trying to do it? And you know, I
Right.
mean, and with the margins that are so low, you'd have to scale to millions and millions of dollars to make it be a consistent income. And so it seemed almost too good to be true or something, or something scammy about it. I don't know. I know
Right. If
people,
it's easy for you, it's easy for everyone.
right? And like I knew I knew people that had done well with it, and I still know people that have done really really well with it.
Hmm.
But for me, it just didn't seem to make as much sense. And I didn't. You don't have as much control as some of this other stuff. I wanted to build a brand. I wanted to have something that was a little bit more consistent and something that I owned and something that I could, not that you can't do that with drop shipping, but
Hmm.
I wanted to just, again, I thought
Own the overall process more.
I wanted to own the overall process. Exactly.
Mhm.
And I've tried, I did wholesale too for a while in the beginning. I went down that route and I had a really hard time with that one too. That was, um, trying to find suppliers, like the margins are tight. Again, it becomes a process of, um, figuring out lots of different things with logistics and bundling. And it just was a lot of work for, what seemed like something that you didn't have a lot of control over, because the supplier at any
Hmm.
point, the suppliers do it. They go, no, we don't want you to sell on Amazon anymore. Our brand is, we want to have control over the channel and all that. So
Right.
private label it was, and that was kind of the beginning of getting into it. And I just started. I legitimately got lucky with probably the first couple products. I just did a Me Too product where all I did was change the color, and slap my logo on it. Simple as that.
Hmm.
I started listening to. I know you work with Scott. I started listening to Scott, actually too. He was
Formerly of the Amazing Seller podcast,
formerly
now
of the
brand
Amazing Seller.
creators. Yep.
You got it. Yeah. So I was very into Amazing Seller. I listened to that actually on my commute back and forth in
Hmm.
that time period. And uh, and yeah, and so it just seemed like, okay, like, let's just start small, get going with it. And I lucked out with the first couple products. The first couple products that I sold, I still sell today, which is kind of incredible. 6 years later, we sell 5, 10 of
These are
them.
the Me Too products.
These are the Me Too products. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything else, I mean, I've had multiple failures, stuff that's
Okay.
essentially, drifted off. But those products somehow, I think that gave me the confidence in the beginning to just go like, oh my God, this works.
Right.
I'm earning $8 a unit on every one of these I sell. And all I'm doing is ordering it and sending it in, it's
Right.
incredible. So that kind of gave me the confidence to keep going. And that's how I got started.
That's awesome. So I think there's a lot of parallels in our story. I was in the corporate world, and I think I learned a lot from Automobile University, like you did, basically
Mm-hmm.
listening to podcasts and
That's what it is.
YouTube and stuff like that in the car, but not
Mm-hmm.
actually watching it
Right.
as I'm driving. But you're using that in your case longer commute times than I had, and so you probably had a lot of stop start. It's probably not 60 miles an hour for 60 miles. You were
Oh yeah.
probably stop,
It's
move,
it's
inch.
the absolute worst type of traffic you can possibly imagine. Chicago 9094,
Hmm.
just stop, start, stop, start. It's, you know, if you've driven lots of miles, it's fine when it's moving 60 miles an hour. You can kind of look at the scenery, whatever. But when you're seeing the taillights, it's like, my God, stop hitting your brakes on the expressway.
So in essence, if I'm understanding this correctly, as you're listening to these entrepreneurial podcasts, it's kind of framed as, do I want to be doing this drive forever? While people
that
are
is it.
describing, hey, you could do it a different way, basically.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I can tell you actually, when it really came to a head, I ended up going back to work for a little bit, but there was one point when the business was working, you know, about a year or two into selling. We were doing, I don't know, a couple 100,000 a year. And I was like, I need to do this more full time. And I actually was on one of those commutes up to a new job site that I had just gotten in the last week. And I had this like crisis of conscience and just went, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to this work site, and I'm going to go. It was probably a terrible move. I'm sure I really upset the person who I was supposed to be working for, but it was that, like, the way that you described that, that's exactly what it was. It was that intense for me where I was like, this is not going to be my life for not 1 minute more. I'm not doing it. Like I said, I did end up going back because it was, you just, with this business, as you know, you need money. You know, there's no way around that piece of it.
Especially if you're scaling up.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. I mean, you
Okay.
can make.
So did you leave the job at this moment of time, or
I
were you
did.
just highly?
No, I turned the
You
car.
literally turned the car around and said, I'm not doing it.
I turned the car around and said, I'm not doing it.
Not even a 2-week notice.
No, it was so bad. It was immature moment, even though I was almost 30. But yeah, the person who placed me there was so angry with me, rightfully so.
Okay. Did you go say, I'll at least go to the other location, or just you?
No, I said
cold turkey.
I cold turkeyed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Said, this is it. You know, we're moving on to other bigger and better things. And I regretted that decision because I did, like I said, have to go back and make more money because I did.
Okay. And you were about 2 years into your journey at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. How long did you leave before you went back to the man? Or woman?
Yeah. So I spent about a year trying to do the wholesale piece of it. That's actually when the wholesale side of it started. And so I was like, okay, I had some success on the private label side. And this is something that I've heard quite often, but this is my actual experience with it. Keep your eye on one thing at a time. Don't try to do multiple things, because I was like, okay, well, we're having success over here with the private label side of it. Wouldn't it be easier just to buy from people in the US in small quantities and send those? And so I did that for that probably 6 to 9 month period. And it was a big learning experience. It took a ton of time, and I just wasn't making, you know, over the course of a year, I made maybe 20 grand. And I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work. And I need to go, because I wanted to scale, you know what I mean? I wanted to get to where I'm at now. And to do that, again, you have to have money. And so that just didn't, I saw the writing on the wall about 6 to 9 months in, and I was like, okay, I got to go back now and, you know, work for the man or woman.
Okay. Gotcha. So you went back to the non-gender descript person who you were working for.
Right. I like it. Stay BC.
All right. So how long did you go back for?
Another probably year to 2 years in total. I lucked out though. So I found a job. I won't say with which company, but this company was a new company, and they didn't really, they were, I don't know. They didn't have enough work for me. And so I had extra time during the day. I'm sure actually a lot of your listeners who are in corporate roles experience this on a regular basis. Like, you've got probably at least a couple of, nobody that works an 8-hour day. I shouldn't say that. Some people do. There's some people that are working really hard at their corporate roles, but most people can find a couple hours in the
especially
day.
If you start looking for the time you go to coffee, water, how many times you go back and forth to the printer.
Yeah. Talking to the, you know,
your coworker.
Yep. Like if you can segment that out. So what I used to do, and this is again, I I'm a terrible employee. Realistically, I was always, I think, kind of destined for to do my own thing. But what I would do is I'd go book conference rooms for periods of time. This place that I worked at had a lot of different conference rooms, and I would just go and, when I had a free hour, so that nobody came and talked to me during that hour, I just go and sit in the conference room and do work on what I wanted to do for the Amazon business.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
slowly just kind of built it up from there.
Okay, so you basically are shifting. Not that we necessarily recommend that to everybody,
Yeah,
but
I
you're
don't,
shifting
but
the
yeah.
coffee coworker conversation time into going into the conference room and working on your business. Okay.
Got to do what you got to do. How bad do you want it?
Yeah, exactly. So some way you got to find margin in your life, whether it's
Yeah, you know
during
what
the
I mean?
workday or after the workday.
Yeah,
You got to find a way.
nobody's giving me that money, so it's like I gotta do both for right now, and it's just
This sounds very 4-hour work week. Now, did you start farming off some of your work to a virtual assistant in the Philippines or India?
Well, I mean, I did that for the business, yeah, absolutely, and I
Oh,
still
okay, but not your actual work, which is one of
no,
the things Tim
no, that's
Ferriss
kind
seemed
of
to have recommended in the
yeah,
book.
which is not a good idea simply because most companies have privacy policies and confidentiality
Right.
stuff
You
in
probably
place,
get
so
sued.
yeah, that's what I don't want to risk that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
needed that. I wanted that. It was enough work to where I could do both and have a couple hours each day. And the commute was better. So I was working downtown instead of in the burbs. So it
Okay.
kind of worked for me. And I just made it work for the first couple. I would have rather been doing what I was doing full time, but I mean, realistically, if you remember back from the beginning to the beginning part of your business, I
Mhm.
mean, like, how much time are you spending in? That's one of the best things about private label and doing
Mm.
this type of work is, you know, you can systemize certain things and you can, I mean, like, how many hours do you feasibly need to spend doing product research once you found a product? Like, what
Mhm.
do you need to do besides reorder? And, you need to obviously pay attention to advertising if they have your listing, but all of that work is done up front. So
Mhm.
if you're in maintenance mode and having money come in, there's not a crazy amount that you need to do to keep it up. And definitely work you need to do, but you don't need I don't know how you would spend 40 hours a week if you were servicing one product or two products. Like,
Right, exactly.
um,
Okay. So from the time that you started this to the time you left the job the second time around, and this was a
mhm.
different job than the first one, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the time you left the job, and said, I'm doing this, I'm going all in. That was about
Yep.
4 years, if my math was understanding
Yeah.
correctly.
Yep. So I worked for the first couple of years, had that break for about a year where I tried to do wholesale. That didn't work. I went back to work for about another year and a half, 2 years. So yeah, in total, probably 4 to 5 years. And then
Hmm.
this year or last year is when I left completely. But the time that I left, people are always like, when should I leave my role? I've gotten that question quite a bit when I've talked to people about this. Like, when should I leave my day job? When should I focus on this full time? And it's like, when you're wanting to do things, but you can't, like when you know that you could scale and you just need to put the time in to do it and you can't,
Hmm.
you just can't find the hours anymore because what you're doing and the cost benefit makes sense from a dollars per hour perspective. So if you're running a business and you're making 30,000 a year and your job is paying you 100,000 a year, like you need to get to a point where those hours like start to make sense.
Hmm.
The hourly rate, you can kind of like, that's I think another thing from that 4-hour work week, but the hourly cost has to make sense. If you're not able to pay yourself $80 an hour, um, and you're spending more hours doing whatever it is, and something you need to consider. But
Okay.
so 5 years.
Okay, gotcha. So the good news is like this is not like one of those like, oh yeah, just started the drop shipping business and 6 months later I'm a millionaire. Here's my Lambo. Like sometimes you see in YouTube commercials.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a real thing. I don't know. Maybe some people have those types of successes. I've never met any of them. And I know they do exist. And I know that I just don't know if you're trying to build a real business. I mean, first of all, the people that have those types of successes, I feel like you had one really good product that just exploded and then you're able to scale up. Our business is not like that. It was a slower, wider catalog where
Hmm.
we're adding in products. I'm selling, anywhere from 2 to 15 a day for most of these things, not
Okay.
like 100 times
Right.
one or two products. So, yeah, that's not real life, I'm afraid.
Okay.
And I think the other thing about these people who apparently are scaling to millions of dollars within 6 months or a year's time frame is, where are you getting the funding? Where are you getting that money? Because most people, tell you what, when I started, no bank wanted to loan me $100,000 or something like that to
Hmm.
scale. So like, you need to have the money to buy the inventory. And I mean, if you just think about it from a cash flow perspective, you buy 1,000 units and you're selling 10 units a day. Well, you've got 100 days before you need to restock if you're ordering from abroad, which most people
Hmm.
are, say China. So that 100-day period, well, most of the time your supplier is going to take 60 to 90 days to get you the next round of products. So you need to reorder within feasibly that first, 30-day window, which means that 1,000 products that you just spent money on, you need to now spend another probably double that amount on the second order. And so, like, do you have that cash available? Because if you don't, then you're going to run out. You're going to have to restart the process again with trying to rank. And people don't factor that in and end up in a situation where you need the money to scale, you need the money to grow, you need the money to stay in stock. And for somebody that goes from 0 to a million, like, where are you getting that funding would be my question to those folks. Did your parents give it to you? Because the bank's not going to do it if you're not more.
Right. Or maybe they had a previous business. I know that some people are in that case, but for most
Yeah,
folks like you and me that started out
yeah,
kind of bootstrapping it. So to
right,
help people kind of understand where you're at now, are you comfortable sharing numbers of sales from
sure.
last year or number of SKUs that you're selling? You don't have to get into like the specifics of the product or anything.
Yeah, so we hovered around. So these last 2 years were our breakout years.
Hmm.
Prior to that, we had a single brand that was a smaller brand, and we were kind of stuck around, say, like 30,000, 40,000 a month in terms of sales with that brand. We added in another brand that was okay, and then it got a number of competitors came in and kind of not disrupted that space, but just essentially, like, it didn't make sense from a margin perspective. And then we launched a third brand, which is where we found vast majority of the success. And throughout that time, I mean, I was having products fail miserably. Like, there were products, and then not from a like, and it was never didn't do enough research and this product isn't, a fit for the market. Like, it was always, yeah, this product is working, or this product will work. People are going to buy it. It was always supplier based quality issues. Even though we do inspections, even though we do certain things like that, there would be unforeseen consequences, unforeseen things that would happen. Like, we did planters, for example, like little succulent planters that were
Okay.
a certain type of material, and that material, like, degraded like so fast, and people and they every one that they would send, every new shipment would have like a certain amount that had these like scratches or dent. Like, I could go on about um, quality issues when you're dealing with new suppliers. But that was a challenge for the first probably 3 to 4 years till we figured that stuff out. We got to a point then probably 3 years ago where we launched this third brand, and that brand we've just added onto and scaled. That's been our bread and butter, and we went from 0 to 500,000 within, say, year one, 500,000 to 1,000,001 in year two, and then 1,000,001 to 2.85 this year. And I think this
As
year,
in 2020, the year
2020,
that
yeah,
just
sorry.
finished. Yeah.
Yep. So
We're
20,
recording this
yeah,
in early 2021. I feel like
right.
every year it's February by the time I realize it's a new
Yeah, keep
year.
me honest. So from 2018 to 2020, yeah, 500,000 to 2.85. We're gonna for sure, I think, double this year again, pending not another pandemic that occurs.
Right.
But the pandemic it wasn't too bad of a
Did the
thing.
pandemic slow you down or did you get a bump in sales? Because some people
A
was
little
either
both.
way. Okay.
Yeah, a little both. So we slowed down tremendously in March and April. When it hit, everything just went nuts on Amazon. Our advertising went through the roof. I panicked. We cut a bunch of advertising. So I was watching, and we can get into this at any point, but the
Sure.
advertising I spend a good amount. I'm really aggressive with advertising. I
Okay.
spend a lot of time figuring out how to do pay per click for the business, and so I'm really aggressive with it. And I was watching my ACOS, which typically hovers around say 25, 30%, go from that to 50 to 70 to 100 within the span of a week, which is very significant, you know what I mean, with what we were spending. And so I had no idea what it was going to continue to be.
Was this one around the time Amazon
March?
Yeah, in March when Amazon all of a sudden said no more inbound shipments, and then they were quoting like a month shipping time to customers. Okay.
Exactly. And so that
was a brutal time for a lot.
It was scary. It really was. And so I watched. So what I did was I ended up cutting these. I kept kind of like the core campaigns, but I cut so much that our sales dropped from, say, we were doing 3,000, 4,000 a day maybe at peak, to we were down. One day I did $850, and I mean it was. So I was like, oh my god, like am I gonna have to reevaluate? You know what we're
go back to the other job.
Yeah, exactly. Calling up the man again. But it turned for whatever reason. So I ended up adding that advertising back in. I panicked. I turned them off. I turned them back on. As soon as I turned them back on, things started to stabilize. I mean, stuff was a little bit higher due to the those delays, you know, where they were putting a month out, but eventually demand returned, stabilized, and then it went up, you know, and then it went up from
sales went up.
Sales went up. Yeah. Okay. Sales went up from May through the end of the year. So, and I mean, I'm sure you've read, and many people are aware that e-commerce has been pushed ahead by about 5 years, and people really don't have an option anymore, you know, in a lot of places. I mean, I'm in Chicago, and everything is shut down. You know, you can't even go to some of these places if you want to buy stuff for people. And so we kind of were in the right place at the right time for this year. I mean, I think we would have certainly continued to grow, but 3X is, I mean, I don't know if that's common or not, but it worked for us this year. And so I think momentum will continue into this next year, and we're going to get into some other products and whatnot. That's why and we've already got stuff coming. So I've just taken the mindset of like, I want to get to 10. 10 is like my threshold. Like,
okay. I love it.
That's kind of, yeah. And so, and what I think is going to happen too in this space is, you know, you're seeing multiples of anywhere from 2 to 4.5. It's kind of the range that I've seen, 2 to 4.5
times profit.
Yeah, times your profit.
For sellers' discretionary earnings, is the folks
sellers' discretionary earnings
would say.
Exactly. Well, one thing I learned from them actually, which I didn't realize in the beginning, if people don't know, is all the ad backs.
Yeah. It's not just profit; it's actually in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. So you get a lot of ad backs. Yeah. So what I think is going to happen is you're going to see, and you can see them now, some of these bigger businesses that have sprung up. Thrasio being one of them, and there's like 9 or 10 of them that are essentially big, you know, heavily well-funded companies that are buying up these smaller brands. And those multiples that you're seeing, which are, I think, probably largely driven by just open market things, you know, some of these like Quiet Light, I'm sure is selling. And I got to imagine as time goes on and, you know, you've got that history and you've got multiple channels and things like that, those multiples are going to continue to go up. So I think that's kind of like the end game.
Well, it's like one of those things, like when you start seeing and this is just a theory of mine, that as you start seeing the price of certain assets going up, because the dollar most likely, and this is just a prediction of mine, I want to say I read somewhere that like the amount of dollars that are out there has gone up like 66% or something like that over the last year. And that printing press, I don't think is going to be stopping anytime soon.
No, probably not.
historically, in my amateur economics sense, it means that
Hmm.
there will be inflation. So that means the value of the dollar, if you just keep it in a bank, it's actually
Yep.
losing money. So
Yep.
people are putting it more and more in assets like stocks and real estate. Well, those kind of first thought assets over time start to become more and more cost prohibitive. So people start looking into other asset classes, other places you can make money. And, I think, as you're saying, if you put yourself in there, and what I do know of the situation is the higher amount of sales you have, the less risky it is to an investor. And so therefore you get an even higher multiple. So you're bringing in more profit, and you're also getting a higher percent, or, multiple times that profit. So that's just more money in the bank. So I love the direction you're going with that. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about PPC, and I want to then talk about like how you're scaling, and maybe the two fit in with each other. So
Sure.
kind of what's your philosophy on PPC?
Yeah. So pay-per-click, I am, if I could say, if there's one driver that is, I think, really accelerated our growth, it's been pay-per-click.
Okay.
And that was something that probably for the first 3 years, it's one of those things, when you're running business, there's certain things that you just don't like to do, where you're like,
Right.
I'm just going to hire somebody to do this because I hate doing this.
Uh-huh.
That was it. But I could just see that I was wasting money, left and right. And most people, I know when I started, it was like one manual campaign, you're running the auto and harvesting some of those keywords and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. Well, I wanted to go way, way deeper and to systemize it and to make sure that I had some kind of system in place. And so what we did primarily was I bought a course. It was an expensive one. It was a $5,000 one.
Okay.
I've had luck across the board with courses. Some are freaking amazing. Some are, we've talked about this, some are not worth, whatever. They're just regurgitated information that you could find on YouTube. So it's kind of a crapshoot. But this one, I talked to the person who provided the course, and he was super knowledgeable. He asked me, "Do you know what this is? You know what this is? You know what this is?" Like all these sort of metrics
Mm-hmm.
within pay per click space, and the answer was always no, no, no. I don't know what that is. And so I went through this comprehensive program, and what it boils down to is you've got, the way that I do it is you are starting with a core set of keywords that's going to be taken from your back-end research. So that reverse ASIN tool
Mm-hmm.
where you're using, I use Helium 10s, where you're coming up with that list of keywords, your core set of keywords. Run that in to start with in a exact, a phrase, and a broad campaign, and bid highest to lowest, with exact, I think, being the highest, broad being the lowest, because you're going to spend people, if you don't know, in pay-per-click, broad is the most searched, is going to be the widest breadth of things you're,
And could be the least relevant keywords
and could
too.
be the least relevant. Exactly. You're casting a wider net versus
Right.
exact, which is a narrow net. So I start there with,
Mm-hmm.
with those key keywords that I know are going to be that are going to work. Actually, I take that back. Before you add the phrase and the broad, which is the wider net ones, start with just exact, and nothing else, and run that for the beginning part, because what Amazon's algorithm is doing in the beginning part of your launch is trying to make sure that you're um, getting, that the traffic that you're getting, that they're showing you for, is converting, and that you're relevant, and that you want to index for a particular set of keywords. You want them to know that you're a blue pair of shoes and not a blue picture or something like that. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
making sure that the algorithm understands who you are. So like I start with exact, run that, then I layer in phrase and broad, same sorts of keywords, and then I will also layer in auto campaigns. I have software that will add in all of it, and I preface this all by saying that at this point I'm using software to adjust bids up and down. So
Mm.
yeah, so
What software are you using?
So it's a homegrown software through this course that I bought, but
Oh, gotcha.
you can use software through I think something like it's PrestoZone. I don't remember. There's software that does the exact same thing. All it's
Okay.
doing is going in and adjusting your bids at scale. So, and that's really the only way that you can do this on a regular basis. So what I do is I have these campaigns running. So I have what amounts to an exact campaign, a phrase campaign, a broad campaign, and a set of auto campaigns. I also have product targeting running that
Hmm.
eventually goes. So I'm doing all of it. And what this software will do is adjust the bids to fall into line with what you want your ACoS to be. So if I'm shooting for a 30% ACoS and I'm bidding $1.50 on a particular keyword,
Hmm.
and I have a 60% ACoS for that keyword based on what I've spent, what the software will do will adjust that keyword down slowly so that I can get to that 30% ACoS. So instead of it bidding $1.50, maybe I'm bidding $1.20, and that's getting me closer. And then maybe the next time I adjust it, it bids it down to $1, so it's getting closer. And it's doing that at scale for all of the different campaigns across the board, so that eventually you start to fall into line. And it's also looking at, okay, like it's not doing it for everything. It's doing it for those that have had a certain number of clicks. You know what I mean? 10 clicks plus.
Hmm.
And there's rules that help govern what it's doing, but that helps to manage this at scale. You can't do this stuff manually. You can't go in if you're going in there and adjusting bids yourself. Like, you're gonna have a hard time. You know what I mean? You can do it when you've got a couple products, not a big deal. But if you really want to grow it out, you've got to have probably some sort of software in place. And what I'm doing in addition to all of that, which I would also recommend, is you should be harvesting the keywords that are coming out of all of these different campaigns. So as you run all these campaigns, you're going to get a ton of data, and you should be looking at this data. You should be trying to figure out, okay, if I advertise for red sneaker and I'm getting a keyword that's constantly coming back, like red shoelace with this particular type of design, and that's something that is converting for me, like I need to take that keyword and plug that back into that campaign or a new campaign so that I'm advertising for that particular keyword. You know what I mean? So that
So you're putting it into all three, the
I
broad, the
am.
phrase, and the exact.
I
Okay.
am. I am putting it into all three. So that, because you never know, weirdly, the exact campaign sometimes performs best. The phrase campaign sometimes performs best. The broad campaign sometimes performs less. And the software is going to adjust that stuff up and down.
How many SKUs? Sorry, how many SKUs are you putting in each campaign?
One, only
Okay.
one ever. Yeah, I'm only doing one. Another thing I don't really do that other people tell you to do is do negatives. I don't do negatives.
Hmm.
Always worried that I'm going to lose out on traffic, and the software is going to adjust the bid. Like if I have it does like cutting bleeders is what they call it, and it's going to be reducing it to the point where if you're not getting sales on something, it's going to reduce it to the point where you're never going to be shown for it anyway. So that kind of
Hmm.
takes away the negative.
Yeah, I agree with you. I used to be all about negative, like get rid of it.
Mhm.
If there's 8 clicks and there's no
Yep.
sales, make it negative. Like I think that philosophy of kind of like you said there at the beginning, start with auto and then a manual broad, and then slowly start to move. Like I agree with you. It's almost like now you have to go the other way around, because I think
Mhm.
Amazon has gotten more aggressive with the number of placements. And so
Yep.
the easy thing for them is to take auto and broad and move them into all these different placements, which means they're getting a little bit more creative license, I guess you could say, with the keywords that they're going to show you for.
Yeah, they're going to spend your money, no
Hmm.
matter about that. So you need to you need to reduce the guard, make those
Yeah.
guardrails much smaller, and that's the way that you do it. And I think the other thing that I'm doing as well is a VA to do all of that harvesting. So every 2 weeks, what I do is I have the keyword report,
Hmm.
which you should absolutely be looking at if you're not, sent
Hmm.
to the VA, and the VA is going through, and I'm doing everything that's over 3 sales. There's a column in that report called advertised SKU units. It's like
Yep.
column 2 or something like that. And you sort it by the anything over 3 sales.
Hmm.
you're going to get essentially all of your like winners. Those are going to be like the best converting keywords. And then anything that's different from your, you're targeting whatever word, and then the actual word that gets searched is going to be in that other column.
Mm-hmm.
Take that keyword and then plug those back into those 3 campaigns. So the broad, phrase, exact. And then I have my VA basically create the bulk file, which people may or may not be using, but
Mm-hmm.
to do anything at scale, you got to do the bulk files. And you just upload that bulk file and with the new keywords every 2 weeks, and that refreshes then you're just kind of spider webbing out into more and more and more and more keywords. So you start with that seed 10 or 15 keywords or more, whatever you can find. And then as every week rolls by, you're getting actionable data that you're then plugging back in and creating a giant spider web of things that you're indexing for. So over the course of 6 months to a year, you're going to now be indexing for hundreds or thousands of keywords and showing up for all the things that you're relevant for. And all of that strategy is going to be based on what you're getting back data wise from Amazon directly. So that's how we've approached it.
Okay. I agree with you there. Like I have found that Seller Central can sometimes be great if I need to go quickly into one particular campaign.
Sure.
But if you can use a bulk upload file, and for those who have not quite figured it out, spend some time learning bulk upload files, because I feel like it's a lifesaver when you're trying to do these things at scale. They're very touchy. You can get a lot of errors, and sometimes you just have to expect certain errors that's just going to happen. But once you get better at it, it can save you hours of time. And going back to the whole thing about negative, like it's better to make it like a 5-cent bid, I think, than make it negative, so that like
Agreed.
you'll hardly ever show up. But if you get one sale a year off of some nonsensical keyword, as opposed to the opposite, which sometimes happens where you accidentally cut it too broadly, and then all of a sudden stuff you really should be showing for, you're not showing for because
Exactly.
it's a little too blunt of an instrument sometimes, the negative.
I will say too, I do go into the actual, I use the console, the advertising console quite a bit. It's actually a surprisingly good reporting tool for understanding, especially at the SKU level. I should also mention too, with setting up your campaigns, you need to be very systematic about how you set up. So we set up our campaigns SKU first, and then like where we, I think what we do, like where we found it, the date we added it. But the SKU at the beginning of your campaign setup is going to, and you can organize it any way you want, but having the SKU at the beginning of the campaign for us allows us then to segment by SKU. So if I'm doing 100% ACOS or whatever ACOS for a particular type of campaign, and we also include the campaign type. So you'll have the SKU, you'll have this other information, then you'll have either broad or phrase or exact. And then what you can do is at the highest level, you can segment then any way that you want. So you can segment by SKU, you can segment by all the broad campaigns, you can segment by all the phrase campaigns. And what that helps you to do is see at one level up, okay, this particular SKU is nowhere near where I need it to be. Why is that happening? And then you can drill into the individual ad groups and go, oh, I have this really generic word in this campaign that is getting all of the traffic, but it's terribly not relevant to my particular, because when you are harvesting these keywords, you're going to get keywords that are super generic that just
right. Maybe they don't really apply, but they kind of do.
Maybe
not really.
Yeah, but then when you try it out, it's like, oh man, this is eating up all my budget and it's garbage. And then all you need to do is you can turn it off manually, or you can adjust. Sometimes I'll adjust, like I'll do at scale, like I'll look at all the auto campaigns and that have been running for some period of time, and then if it's over 75%, I'll just cut the budget down to like $2 or something like that. I rarely turn stuff off unless it's like egregiously bad. But that's, I do use the actual advertising console.
Okay, good deal. And then another question, kind of, I've heard you use the phrase process and systems. So it seems like you have a lot of systems and processes. So if someone's looking to scale up, how would you recommend they start setting up their own systems and processes? So some of these decisions are not decision fatigue, especially for those folks who are like you and I started, where they maybe have a job.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you absolutely need to have systems and processes in place that you're doing that are repeatable. And I mean, we've scaled up because eventually you get to a point where you've got to have other people that help you with this stuff. If it's a
Hmm.
VA, if it's an assistant, most people are going to be at that level for quite some time. I had a VA, and I also had a my cousin, younger guy, just graduated school, really has been into this type of business, and he was kind of like his own little, had his own little side hustles when he was younger, and so
Right.
having somebody that can be your right hand person is super,
Mm.
I think, helpful if you can find somebody like that. A VA can do a lot, but having somebody that you can just say, okay, set them up with your, get them account access, their own account access. Don't give them your password, but like have them have their
Right.
own.
They have user permissions on their
Exactly.
own
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
access.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying
Yeah.
to say. Exactly. But then being able to just, on a regular basis, get Slack or something like that, and you can basically just say, hey, can you go in and look at this? Can you add listings? Can you do this? Can you do that? And again, VAs can do a lot of it, but having somebody that's readily on hand to do some of this stuff is super beneficial. But um, to your systems and processes questions, yeah, I came from, again, a consulting background, and a lot of what I was doing was system helping people figure out their processes. And so that comes second nature to me. And
Okay.
maybe you've already recommended this book, the E Myth,
Oh, the
Ecommerce.
E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one
Yeah.
too. Yeah, so you can start to segment the business into individual functions and individual tasks, and in each kind of bucket, there's certain things that you need to do. Some things that are repeatable, some things that are ad hoc, kind of at the time that you need to do them. And the things that are repeatable, you need to create some sort of process document for, so that if it's your VA, whether it's your younger cousin, doesn't matter,
Hmm.
they can follow that process, step one, step two, step three, and do everything that they need to do. And the more that you build out this process repository, you'll call it, and the more that you keep that up to date, then the more these parts of your business are interchangeable, right? You never want to have somebody who's doing everything, because when they leave, they invariably will
Mm.
going to be in a position where you then have to then backtrack and figure out, okay, how did they do that? What were they doing? And what I mean?
Right.
You're going to forget, like there's things that you're doing to begin with that a year from now you might forget how to do. And so having that organized in a systematic way is going to be the foundation for scaling, adding team members, because ultimately what you want to be able to do is to be able to say, okay, new VA or new assistant or whatever, here are your 6 tasks. Here's how you do them. This takes, 10 hours a week to do. This takes 5 hours a week to do, so on and so forth, so that you're building up the individual pieces of the business rather than, um, you know, making it more like individual parts is how I would put it. There's tons of tools that you can use to, you can start in Excel, you can start in Word just by creating the step-by-step process. But then, I mean, there's other tools like I use one, I think Trent Deersman has a tool, that
Oh
is
yeah. Flowster,
closer. Yeah, that's one. But things like,
Asana, Trello.
you got it. Yeah. Oh yeah. We use Trello, we use Slack, all of that type of stuff. But that's, I mean, there's nothing, it doesn't seem important because you're like, well, I'm the only one doing this right now, but it becomes tremendously important, and it's more difficult than you think, because people, there's whatever sort of bias, I don't know what it's called, but basically you can't see what other people are seeing when they're fresh eyes to something. You've got all
Mm.
the institutional knowledge about your business.
Hmm.
There's things that you pick up along the way that just become second nature, and somebody that's starting brand new has no idea what you're talking about, how, they're not familiar with the tools, they're not familiar about what they need to do, and so having something to refer back to makes the process go much faster. You know what I mean? And it's coming from you who knows how to do it, step one through A through Z.
Hmm.
So get that started sooner rather than later for your important stuff. I mean, just start with the important stuff. So I did do that for the VA, for the PPC. That was one of the biggest ones that I had to do. It's like, okay, I got to pull the report every week. You need to sort by this column. You need to pull out the keywords that have this criteria. You need to do this with the bulk file. You know what I mean? And so, but once you've got that in place, okay, well, I just handed off. So my time's worth whatever per conceptually, if you're thinking about it this way, my time's worth $500 an hour, let's call it. And I'm paying somebody $10 an hour to do this. Once you've offloaded all of that, you've just saved yourself that $500 an hour. Like you've just saved yourself that time that you're having to spend, which is going to free you up to do any number of things. And I've always been the type that you get rewarded for passing work off to people. Like, how good is that? Like, you get rid of a job that you don't want to do, that you've already mastered, that, somebody else can do for you. Like, you ultimately should be trying to, in my opinion, pull yourself out of the business so that the business is running on autopilot. You want to go you can still provide whatever oversight, but you want to go leave for a couple of weeks, you should be able to have your team manage the business and not have things fall apart. Like eventually you have to stop. I know a lot of people probably feel like this that are running businesses, but it kind of feels like you're just like duct taping things constantly, like bolting this on, bolting that on, so on and so forth. When you systemize, you eventually get to a point where that isn't the case anymore, and you just have repeatable processes that people can follow.
I love it. I love it because that's so much of it is that, oftentimes we hold on to things like, oh, because that's what got me from point A to point B. But what gets you from point B to point C might be different skill sets. And so, sometimes as humans, we revert back to what we're comfortable with. And so if we got from point A to point B, we feel good about ourselves and we think, oh, these are the things I need to keep doing. But to your point, you got to start, moving stuff off. Or like, with PPC, I've been guilty of this where it's like, you don't want to give something away to someone else because you're afraid like, oh, they're going to mess it up, or they're going to miss like this, like home run keyword or whatever that they should, like, either to your point, the process maybe isn't, doesn't have the right criteria, or is it really worth it? The amount of time you might spend on something like that. So I'm challenging myself on more and more things, both in my e-commerce business and with maximizing e-commerce, to have stuff, given off to VAs and whatnot, because maybe I enjoy doing some of that work, but is it really work I should be doing?
Well, that's what it is. Like my grand vision is to build the machine, have the machine in place, and just continually. I'm really good at product development. I know how, and that's the thing I enjoy most about the whole Amazon space or e-commerce in general. I like developing products. I like coming up with new ideas. That's the piece that I enjoy the most. So what I want to be able to do is to continue to bring in new ideas, new products, all of that, and then plug it into the machine, which already has all of the stuff ready to go. Like somebody that's going to create the listing, make it optimized, somebody that's going to do the pay-per-click, somebody that's going to get the photography done, somebody that's going to, all of that is in place. I just hand it off on the conveyor belt, and then the rest of the team takes it through to the end. And then at the end, you've got a listing that's ready to go. It's fully optimized and it's going to run. And that's just how I've always thought about doing this. Like eventually you're going to have to pull yourself out of whatever sort of minutia you're in order to see. You can't go from 1 million to 10 million without a team. And so when you build that team, like you can't be the bottleneck ever. Like if you're going to be the bottleneck and they have to go through you to do, the simplest of tasks, and they don't have that kind of autonomy because you haven't created any sort of process to do anything, like things start to break down at that point, and it becomes much more painful than if you would have just figured it out at the beginning and laid some of that groundwork.
Yes. Good stuff. All right. So to kind of close out here, I know we talked a little bit about how we would work together to help you get started selling internationally. So I know some people will probably be like, well, you got to ask at least some question about that. So tell me a little bit about your experience now that you're up and running. So like, do you feel like it was worth your time to sell in some of these international marketplaces? Do you think you should have maybe spent more time building a Shopify store? Like, tell me about that experience.
Sure. And that's a good question. So this year has been, especially towards the end of the year, we have expanded like crazy into all sorts of different markets. So we in the US, got into, and this is the benefit of having a team, we got into Walmart, Etsy, eBay, all the kind of markets that you can get into in the US. And then abroad, Europe, UK, and Canada. And so to answer the question about abroad first, I would say make sure, first of all, before you're getting into abroad, that you're 100% maximized on Amazon US, because broad is complex. Like the more marketplaces you add, the more complexity you're adding to the operation. Even with some of these processes in place, you still have to figure out, like, I mean, for each marketplace, you have to send an order to it, right? Like, and there's restrictions in each of those marketplaces around, especially right now, what you can send. Each from the supplier, each order that you create has to have different SKUs and things on it. Like, there's a lot of different pieces that you need to consider. That said, I do think it's a great thing to do. And if you're looking for, I wouldn't call it an easy way to add revenue to your bottom line, you should 100% consider it. But make sure that you're stable in the US and you're maximizing what you can in the US, because there's no bigger market right now than the US.
Right. It is the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
It is the 800-pound gorilla, exactly. And so for us, I mentioned before the podcast, we sent on our first order. I mean, we blew through everything, UK and Canada. We're getting into Europe now. Europe was a little bit more of a challenge. We because there's so many different countries, so Amazon reached out to us and said, okay, we'll subsidize your accounting costs. Like, you have to have that in a couple of the different countries, or maybe
pretty much everywhere you're storing goods.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like that, again, when I talk about the complexity, there's that I just paid my quarterly VAT taxes for Italy. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going to have to do that for all 7 countries. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that systematically so that, you know what I mean? But again, like, we sent everything, every single product that we sent there sold through. So like, we're anticipating potentially, I don't know, another 30% on top of what we're selling in the US, which is extreme. Like, when I say we're predicted to double this year, okay, we did 3 million roughly last year, then big chunk of what we're expecting for this year is going to be made up of that additional revenue that we're selling.
So if my math is correct there, you're looking at your international Amazon sales will be a 7-figure business for you this year, most likely.
That would be phenomenal. I will say that some of our products are US specific. So so it won't be 1-to-1, but most of them do. And that's really the goal in terms of, and I think we can get there this year. If there were no inventory restrictions, I would say yes, that would be 100% the goal. But right now, I'm tempering my expectations because, as we talked about beforehand, for example, like, I can't ship anything to Europe right now because they're still coupled with the UK, and so I have inventory restrictions in the UK market, which are applying now to the UK market, which are preventing me from sending anything in. And for most new units that I'm creating in those spaces, it's 200 max. So how quickly do you sell through 200 if you're selling 5 a day? It's very fast. And with the slowdowns in the global logistics system, it's taking a month at least to get, from point A to point B. So I'm going to run out of that 200 very quick, and I'm not going to be able to get it in quick enough to replenish it. So I know I'm going to be in this stock out situation for some time, not because of anything that I'm doing, but because Amazon's restricting what you can send in. And yeah, they will increase the amount that you can send in, but it's going from 200 to 250, which opens up maybe like a 70 unit window or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that doesn't help me really. But yeah, I totally think it's worth it. Let me just throw that out there. Definitely worth it. Definitely worth exploring and I recommend, like I said at the beginning, having a partner with it, whether it's you or whoever that knows what they're
Sure.
doing, because it makes it much easier, much less scary to handle some of the stuff like the paperwork, and having a human being to interact with is
Right.
much better than, because Amazon will help you with some of that, and for larger sellers, I'm pretty sure they will subsidize the accounting cost for all of it. That's what they did for me for Europe. So I mean, they want you to expand. They're trying to make it easy, and it's worth doing.
Yeah. So just to help people get a little context on that, if you don't mind, if you're saying you're expecting about 30% of your US sales on Amazon.com, or comparing to your US Amazon.com sales, about 30% abroad, which is a pretty healthy number.
Mhm.
What do you envision your off Amazon looking like this year?
So Etsy has been a great channel for us.
Mhm.
We did, um, and we didn't get into Etsy until probably right before Q4, and with some of the logistical challenges, because we use one of the nice things about Amazon FBA, you can use that inventory to fulfill any of these other marketplaces that you're in,
Right.
for unless it's Walmart. You have to be separate. We use
Right.
Deliver for that. The Amazon inventory, you're using to fulfill with Shopify and Etsy, um, doesn't add much work to the process. If you've got a tool, we have a tool that sits over top of all of these different marketplaces, Shopify and Etsy specifically, that automates the order flow. So that makes it a little bit easier. In those two marketplaces, we'd expect at least 10%. It's been that much with Etsy almost alone.
Okay.
It's been really surprising for us. We have really giftable products,
Mhm.
and it's with Etsy's.
Etsy's
Uh,
a pretty giftable,
yeah,
especially
so
around the holidays, I would say.
right, and so I don't know. It's going to be. I'll be interested to see kind of where we level off, because the holiday time is so different for us. We are 4 to 6 whatever times, probably as much as during the rest of the year. So I'll be interested to see where we kind of level off with that stuff. But
Okay.
I would love to see anywhere from 5 to 10%. And I think for us specifically, these other channels, Europe and Etsy and other marketplaces, we know, one, these channels are growing. I mean, if you look at the growth of Walmart, and you look at the growth of Etsy, and you look at the growth of Shopify, it's astronomical. So that's going to continue, most likely into the foreseeable future. So why not get started on some of these places now? But then in addition to that, you alluded to it with Quiet Light, the more diversified you can be in some of these channels, the less risky your business looks to a potential investor, and the multiple that you're going to get. So if you're getting, let's say, 4x your, on a return on your net, like, then maybe every dollar you're spending, it might be worth $4 more down the line. So it's
Mhm.
worth considering some of that as an ancillary channel. That said, like, if you're spending 20 hours a week on a channel that's making you 5% of your income, like, maybe reevaluate. But if it's something you can bolt on that doesn't necessarily require a ton of extra time, and use a tool to help automate the order process,
Mhm.
um, you're gonna be good. And you also need to have somebody to do the customer service side of it. We get a lot of customer questions through Etsy. Amazon, I think, handles, I mean, even with 10x the
Mhm.
volume, we get way less questions on Amazon than we do on Etsy. Etsy's like a lot of hand holding for people. So you got to have somebody in place probably for that channel specifically, and Shopify too. It's more involved from a customer service perspective.
Right. Right. So in essence, if you're selling, sometimes you just have to try different things. And so, even though I'm kind of like the international guy in some respects,
Yeah.
I'm not anti going on other channels, but they
Mhm.
all come with their own
They do.
unique challenges, where at least I have found, if you start getting into like pan-European and Europe, that's a whole level of complexity. But if you
Yep.
start someplace like Canada or even the UK without going into the rest of Europe, like you said, Amazon's going to take care of most of your customer service stuff.
Right.
And you can probably replicate a lot of your processes because the PPC stuff is almost the
Same.
same. It's just
It's
maybe the
exactly the
bids are a little
same.
different.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly the same process. And I just the software that I use is over all of these different marketplaces, and the VA can just create. I have her create bulk files for each individual marketplace, so it just slots right in. Same thing. That's one of the great things. Again, back to processes. It's like, okay, so it's that easy to then bring in a new marketplace, a new Amazon marketplace, because you've already got all these processes in place.
Awesome. Well, if somebody wanted to follow along with you, where would they go?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Ross John D is my profile. Jonathan Ross is my name, and you can find me on Facebook too. I mentioned before, I get a good amount of messages on Facebook. Sometimes I don't. I'm slow to respond to some of that. I'm not like I don't have like a formalized guru teaching program or anything like that. So, but I do have a lot of people that sometimes reach out to me about things. So, yeah, those are places that you can contact if you be.
Okay, good deal. And we will, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have links in the description below. And if you're listening to this, you can go to maximizingecommerce.com/90 as in 90, and we will have links in the show notes as well. Or your podcast player probably has the links in the show notes. So this is an interesting description. Always enjoy talking to you, John.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yep.